the ultimate backbreaker for this Cowboys season? Because I think a lot of them, did you want to play the ultimate backfire?
That's Dawson's favorite segment, by the way.
Because I'm sure a lot of people are going to say before the season even started, that's not mine, but I'm curious, like, what led you down this path?
Yeah, no, for all something and purposes, Kevin.
Intense.
This season's over.
Yes.
They have 8 games left. They will play the 8 games. They have 9 people on IR right now.
Wow.
And their starting quarterback who, listen, you've talked about it a lot. Not all the resources are gone.
No.
But the resources for the future definitely are in limbo.
Yeah.
This year, though, you're going, okay, this guy is going to be relied upon to carry it. Him and CeeDee Lamb, and that dude's not there. And he wasn't playing good before the injury either. The team wasn't playing good. And so that a lot of people could probably put it on that. That was the moment where it finally came to all right, that's it. But there are lots of pinpoint areas on this team that I think you can look at and say, that's the moment. For me, Kevin, it is a little before the season, but it's right around the time of the end of training camp. And that was when you decided to go with 2 rookies on your offensive line that probably aren't ready. And there's a possibility the left tackle might move to right tackle next year.
Sure. And
there's a possibility that maybe that your center isn't the center for the future, but he's done a pretty good job. But when you made that decision and Zach Martin fell off, you didn't know Steele wasn't going to be it. You really were like, Tyler Smith's there, baby. That was the moment that I think broke this season, because that is the linchpin for your offense playing well. That led to Dak Prescott's injury. Dak Prescott doesn't have to run around if that offensive line is good enough to produce with their running backs and the offense in general. He doesn't have to run around. Now he's gone because of it. And the points on the board just weren't there.
I have a Cowboys question for you based off of what you're saying.
This is in hindsight, too.
Is BB, he was not a center in college.
He was a guard.
If Zach Martin retires, is it easier to move him to guard to make him a better player and draft a center?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I don't know. You'd have to ask Broadus and Wolchuk right now.
We're not signing a free agent, so it has to be in the draft.
Well, I mean, they had faith in their other center and to a certain degree in training camp as well.
Yeah, just wondering, like, when you're mentioning that, and BB might be a great center in the future as he keeps getting better at it. But then I was thinking Zach Martin's retiring at the end of the year, most likely. And then I'm just thinking to myself, I wonder if you move BB to guard, does that make him a better player in year 2? But
yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah, and again, I just discussed the idea of the possibility of your left tackle moving to right tackle. You can have both of those guys in their second year, and then maybe they're at the right position for themselves for the future.
And I'll admit, I was excited to see how Terrence Steele looked this year, because he was saying all the right things. He was like, hey, look, a whole nother year with the injury behind me. I'm having the best training camp of my career, and I was really hopeful.
And I want to continue a little bit on that, because you could say there's a lot of different ways that this can go in this conversation. The fact that your offense never could keep up with what your defense was giving up, again, goes back to me. In my opinion, it starts there at the offensive line. And then across the offensive line, how many times you got into the red zone and a penalty happened? Or they got beat. Your guy got beat for whatever reason. The offensive line led to, because there's 5 dudes there, that if one of them makes a mistake, it can cost your team 10 yards. And consistently inconsistent. There was a time when you were just like, man, we can drive down the field and not have a penalty at all. But not this year. That's not what this team is, because you decided to go young there, and you knew you were going to have some bumps that you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it leads to some very serious problems for your offense. For me, and again, that is hindsight now. That is hindsight for me, but when I look back around this season, I look back and say that's the point that broke the season for the Cowboys.
So I have a very specific point as well, but I might be kind of rethinking it just a little bit.
Okay.
I think I've changed my mind. I was going to say the injury to Micah, because I broke it down like this. I mean, you weren't great in those first 4 games, and you were giving up 26 points a game, which, again, not great. They held up fine against the Steelers, but the next 3 games before Micah came back, The Cowboys gave up 34.7 points per game. So their defense is getting smashed. They started 2-2, went 1-3 without Micah, as well as the others. I know other people left, but it did seem like going back several years, Micah turned this defense from one of the worst defenses we've ever seen to, hey, this is totally acceptable.
You still felt like you could get some pressure, and you have not seen what you expected at all.
I agree. But I changed my mind to one specific sequence of plays. It was kicking a field goal against the Detroit Lions. All right. Now, were they probably going to get worked in that game? Well, I can look back at it now and say, oh, that feels like a logical takeaway. But the Cowboys hadn't scored a touchdown on the first drive all season, and they are moving. 1st and 10 at the Detroit 18. Short pass to CD gets you 2 yards. Then an incompletion, then another incompletion, and you settle for a field goal. So instead of finally starting a game with a touchdown to get the momentum going, you start for a field goal. What happens then? You get outscored the rest of the game, 47-6. And that is where it all fell apart, because not only did you get worked in that game, then you lost to San Francisco, you lost to Atlanta, and you make a pretty strong argument that game wasn't as close as the final score, and then you got demolished by Philadelphia. These Cowboys were holding on by a string, but they had won a game against Pittsburgh that they out-toughed their opponent, which is something the Cowboys never or rarely do. They did that on the road against what now looks like a better Steelers team, and then you were 3-2. And then you come out against the Lions, who we all thought was a really good team, settle for the field goal, and everything since then has been pretty much crap.
And wouldn't you say, because of that kind of a beatdown, Dak Prescott's trying to make up for it?
I'm sure.
With his legs, and that's something that he couldn't do this year.
Yes.
He probably shouldn't have been doing this year. Even though everybody was like, you have to be able to escape at some point, instead of, or as Mike's pointed out many times, throw the ball away in those situations.
That is where I wish it would happen. But I see a lot of people saying before the season,
all in.
Yeah, man.
So a lot of people are kind of marking it back to Green Bay last year in the playoffs. Is whenever this season was lost, because at that point, you'd think that Jerry would say, let's add to a good team. A team. What do we need to add to this team that can make them better? Although it's just weird how that game went and ended, and they didn't. They let coaches go. They let players go. They didn't add any other players to make up for those losses on their depth front.
Mike, did you have a...
I've thought about it. Probably the exact moment would be when Dak got hurt.
Okay.
Because I can look at it this. Yeah, the Saints game. That was a big-time warning sign.
It was.
And then they ended up a few weeks later beating the Giants. It was an ugly win, but they beat the Giants. But then they beat the Steelers, and you're like, you know what? This is who the Cowboys. This is Dak Prescott-led Cowboys team. He's not good enough to get you far in the playoffs, but he is good enough to figure out how to win 10 games
and get you to the playoffs.
And that's who Dak Prescott is. But then you get killed by Detroit, and you're thinking, well, that's fine. That's what Dak does. He gets killed by good teams. That's his career. Now let's look at the games where you should win, but the injury now, you know that you can't beat average teams anymore. You're going to lose to the average teams. You're going to get destroyed by the good teams.
I
maybe you beat the Giants. Maybe you beat Carolina still, but I guess I look at it and go, hey, there was a lot of warning signs. I think you guys pointed out some really great things with the defensive injuries, but once Dak got hurt, that's the finish. Like, best case scenario, they go 6-11, and they ain't going. I don't think they're going 6-11. I just think that's best case if you're hoping for them to win games.
From the 808, when your owner didn't know the difference between all in and not doing anything. From the 682, when Zeke came back. And the reason I wanted to spotlight those two is because there's a lot of people that are like, no. It was before the season started, as opposed to a moment in the season. But in the season, from the 2-4, when you couldn't score against the Saints. Mike's right. That was a big warning sign, too. And that's when I thought the Saints were going to be really good. And then they turned out to be freaking terrible.
You don't know that?
Well, thus
We do.
far, they have been
But they
freaking terrible.
They won their last one with the new head coach.
They did. But be
clogged the
honest.
toilet.
Be honest. Why do you love that new head coach?
He clogged a toilet, and he said, I don't feel like a real NFL coach right now because he clogged a toilet right before the first game he ever coached. I think that's hilarious.
That's a lot of information from him. Now, another thing that's come up, and people can give, more inflection points, absolutely. But another thing I keep looking at is Mike McCarthy keeps talking about the turnover ratio and is like, oh, it makes me sick. The Cowboys have given the ball away 18 times. That's the third highest in the NFL. Guess what? They have a minus 10 turnover ratio. Cowboys were plus 10 last year and tied for the second fewest turnovers in the NFL. The Cowboys have already turned the ball over more this year than all of last year.
Yeah, how sick do you think he was after Zeke's fumble at the goal line? And I say
That was bad.
I say that specifically because, and I don't know, I just feel like he wasn't the one raising his hand saying, please bring Zeke back.
Probably not.
But he's like, I have to play this guy because he's on the team and I need to get carries. And goal line is why we brought him back. We brought him back for these situations. And then he runs and fumbles the ball at the goal line. Specifically for that situation, that's why he's here. And he adds to that differential right there. A lot of people, Kevin, are bringing up Dak's contract as the moment that it was the backbreaker, and I'm curious about that.
I don't think for this season, but I agree with this. If you're saying...
Hasn't even kicked in yet.
This is my opinion. That destroyed hope for the next 4 years. You're done. You cannot win with him on that contract and the talent that he is.
Okay.
He just isn't good enough. He's good, but at that money, he cannot carry a team, and you can't put the pieces around him to make it the team you need.
And if there was anything in the locker room that was like, hey, maybe there's a chance that one day we'll have a different quarterback.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist
Boy,
anymore.
if you thought he was slow now, wait till he comes back from this injury.
Yeah, it's... And I know Mickey's right. There's nothing you could do to change about it now, but I just think about, Jerry said, oh, everybody's all in. People are on the last year of their contracts,
that
both
motivation,
players and
I
coaches.
Get it.
And then right before the start of the season, the guy who said, I don't necessarily care about being the highest paid quarterback, gets the most in the NFL by $5 million. And I heard what Mickey said earlier, that his team would much rather have a bidding war out on the open market. I could absolutely see that. But now you can look at it and you're like, I don't know, the Cowboys might have done the same thing. He got hurt the last time he was in the last year of his contract, and they're like, well, let's give you all the money anyway. So when they so far surpassed the most money in the NFL for their quarterback, and they had such a huge bill still coming on him, remember, his cap hit next year is $90 million just about.
Okay.
Now, I know they got $20 million to carry over. They can keep pushing money down the road because that'll never come back to bite them again. You haven't even seen this contract kick in yet. If you're mad now, it hasn't even started.
What if he was saying, remember the other day, he was like, I think we could get a couple fourths for it? What if he was talking about Dak and he's like, we can get a couple fourths for it if they take the money on?
Well, you're not going to be able to do that for a big chunk of your cap hit. I think your dead cap would be like, I don't know, $150 million or something
That's
like
it?
that. Mm-hmm.
All right. You spread that Shohei? Can we spread it Shohei style?
You cannot.
Kevin, it seems like you're against us having fun.
No, I'm legitimately telling you, you cannot. If you told me your idea was, let's take $150 million salary cap hit, draft a quarterback number one, and just suck next year and get another high pick, well, I'm willing to listen to that.
That's the only way, though?
Otherwise, I just don't see how they can do it. And the Cowboys have no stomach for this. Jerry Jones has told us again and again, they have absolutely, right now, I will tell you, and I'll ask him on Friday if he disagrees, Jerry Jones has absolutely no will to rebuild right now. That's a fact.
I don't know when the last time he did.
Good question.